Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Thank you for joining us for today's launch webinar of the report Maximising Uranium Mining Social and Economic Benefits, a Guide for Stakeholders. It's now my pleasure to introduce Deanne Cameron, Head of the Division of Nuclear Technology and Economics at the NEA, who will be the Master of Ceremonies. Deanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the launch of the new publication by the Nuclear Energy Agency on Maximizing Uranium Mining Social Economic Benefits, a Guide for Stakeholders. My name is Deanne Cameron. I am the head of the Nuclear Technology Development and Economics Division at the Nuclear Energy Agency, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's event. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the NEA's Director General, William D. Magwood IV, to provide some opening remarks. DG Magwood, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Deanne, and welcome to all of you to this webinar. The discussion we've all been having around the world over the last year or so, which has intensified quite significantly, is what is going to be the role of nuclear power as we deal with the climate crisis. The answer for some countries has been to look at extending the lives of existing nuclear power plants, building new nuclear power plants, and exploring new technology, nuclear, SMRs, small reactors, microreactors, even floating reactors. These technologies have one thing in common, that they all start with the use of uranium. Uranium is the fuel of choice for nuclear power around the world. There are other options, but uranium is primary natural resource that we draw on. There is enough uranium in the world to power all of our needs for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there's plenty of uranium out there. Most of it today is mined from Kazakhstan, Canada, and Australia, but there are other parts of the world as well. This new interest in nuclear, if it is fulfilled, could lead to a bit of a uranium rush, a desire to find more resources and to extract those resources. And for some people, this might recall the experience of the 1950s when we had this tremendous rush towards finding uranium resources wherever they were possible. Back in those days, the interest was really more associated with the Cold War than with energy production, but nevertheless, it was a very dramatic rush to find these resources. In the context of, in the process of finding those resources, sometimes care for the environment, care for local communities was not on the high priority list. There was such an urgency to get these resources that some of the mining operations left behind waste, which in some parts of the world we're still cleaning up. Obviously, the world has changed a lot, and when we look for these resources in the future, a great deal of care must be taken and is essential to be taken to assure that we don't create environmental impacts that are negative, that don't impact human health, and especially, but really we have to go beyond that. It isn't just doing no harm. It's really looking for the opportunity to have positive impacts on communities that host uranium mining operations. That is really the focal point of this document, Maximizing Uranium Mining Social and Economic Benefits, a Guide for Stakeholders. As people around the world look at the possibility of mining uranium, we should also be looking at how societies and communities can build skills and jobs, how they can not simply get the energy benefits in uranium, but really realize a wide range of benefits. And this report highlights that. And this report has a special characteristic which we're all quite proud of. That is, it contains case studies that look at real life cases, that look at how benefits can be realized by the communities. And in particular, members of the English River First Nations have participated directly in this report, and you'll see that they will have an insert in the report that they've written without our editing. And so it's their views on this situation. And you'll hear from a representative of the First Nation on this panel today. So this report, I think, is just really the first step in understanding what we have to do differently to realize the greater benefits for uranium mining for our communities around the world, and to reflect on how to avoid the mistakes of the past. So without further ado, I will hand the floor back to Deanne, who will be guiding the rest of this conversation. But and I know many others around the world will be listening and watching with great interest. Deanne, please.
Thank you, DG Magwood. I would now like to acknowledge some of the key contributors who shaped and led the work to prepare this report. First, Luminita Grancia. Luminita was a senior advisor at the Nuclear Energy Agency on uranium mining and markets from 2015 to 2022, and she was the driving force behind this report. She had the vision to propose a report that would consider the social and economic impacts of uranium mining on local communities, and it was her commitment to bringing the people side of the story to the discussion about uranium mining that you can see. It is evident on every page of the report. Regrettably, we were unable to launch this report before her departure from the NEA, but we'll do our best to do it justice here today without her. Next, I'd like to acknowledge the two co-chairs of the expert group that supported the preparations of the report, Keith Cunningham and Jordy Grates. I'd now like to introduce Keith and Jordy in order, and then they'll provide some introductory remarks. First, Keith Cunningham from CKSK Consulting is a professional engineer in Saskatchewan with experience as an engineer in the oil industry and 30 years with the government of Saskatchewan, including 20 years as an industry analyst for the uranium industry working on forecasting, socio-economic, royalty issues, and mine remediation closure. Keith is now a private consultant with CKSK Consulting, and we're very happy to have him as one of the co-chairs to provide opening remarks now. Keith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deanne. The uranium industry is an important component of the nuclear cycle and a significant economic driver in many remote areas and jurisdictions. Maximizing uranium mining social and economic benefits, a guide for stakeholders, provides an overview of past and current experiences, lessons learned, and best practices. Provides policy discussion and advice for jurisdictions who may wish to develop their uranium industry and the stakeholders whom they should engage, as well as advice on best practices for existing operations. The words nuclear and uranium can invoke a political and activism component, yet many of the principles discussed in this document actually apply to all extractive industries. It is those components that have also resulted in the uranium industry becoming a leader in best practices for everything from environmental management, corporate responsibility, to stakeholder engagement and socio-economic benefits. Since this guide was initiated, the world has seen unexpected events of pandemic and conflict and the resultant impacts. The industry is resilient and it will continue to be a world leader in best practice. With continued attention on issues of climate change, the nuclear and uranium industries have the potential to reduce the carbon footprint of power generation, and the development of SMRs provides future opportunities for economic development. Like other extractive industries, uranium mining has numerous economic, social, and environmental impacts, and those are both positive and negative. The industry must continue to build trust and address negative perceptions of legacies associated with past activities. Environmental and human health and safety concerns often dominate stakeholder engagement, more so than some of the socioeconomic aspects which may be of concern to the local stakeholders. Experience, knowledge, and understanding of operations leads to higher public acceptance in those local regions. There's no single correct answer to the best practices or to the regulatory systems for each jurisdiction. Each government must make decisions that are best suited to meet their policy directives, whether that be for royalty tax generation, economic development, socioeconomic benefits, environmental and human health and safety. This guide provides discussion, case studies to assist emerging jurisdictions in their decision-making processes, and also for existing jurisdictions to continue to advance their best practice development for a sustainable industry. I appreciated being involved and being able to contribute to this guide and to have worked with many valued colleagues. I look forward to today's discussions. Thank you, and I'll return the floor to Diane.
Thank you, Keith, for the opening remarks and also for your help in shaping and driving this report to completion. I'd like to now introduce Jordy. Jordy Grates was appointed CCO of Silex Systems in November 2022 and leads the company's commercial and business development activities. Dr. Grates was previously responsible for government and international affairs at the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organization, that's ANSTO. He holds a doctorate in political science and business management, as well as a graduate certificate in mineral resources and sustainable development from the University of Queensland. And I'd like to invite Jordy now to provide some opening remarks as the former co-chair of the expert group that developed this report. Over to you, Jordy.
Jan, I'm very pleased to be here today, though perhaps not at this hour, what is very early on a Friday morning my time, and I wish to thank Deanne and her team for the invitation. Like Deanne, I particularly wish to acknowledge the efforts of Dr. Lumini de Gracia and put on record my thanks to her for her passion for the uranium industry, for the expert group, and for the report that we are launching today. This was Luminida's vision, to capture the benefits and outcomes for communities and individuals who are touched by the uranium industry and to communicate those benefits to the wider community of stakeholders. Before going on to make a few brief and scripted, given the hour, remarks about those benefits and on the subject of social license issues that are addressed in the report, I wanted to express my thanks to the NEA for its support for the development and publication of this report, to Keith, my co-chair, for his wisdom and contributions, and to our colleagues who gave their knowledge, expertise, and time to the expert group and to this report. I also wish to acknowledge the other contributors to this launch event. Colleagues, we're here today because we know the value of the uranium industry to the communities and regions in which uranium projects are established. But this report does a great service in enunciating the benefits that uranium companies and supply chain partners, working in conjunction with government, community, and civil society stakeholders, bring to a much wider audience. The benefits, of course, include jobs, royalty payments, contributions to social and economic development through capacity building programs and other initiatives, and diversification of opportunities through greater access to education, healthcare, goods and services, and productivity enhancing infrastructure. The report notes substantial community development programs across the jurisdictions in which the uranium industry is present, from a partnership between Orano and the FXB Association in Mongolia that provides people living in extreme poverty with the tools they need to become self-sufficient by dispensing nutritional, health, education, and housing support, as well as business advice, through the admirable work of the Rosing Foundation over many years in Namibia, which has provided education, training, innovation and enterprise development assistance to empower communities, to the agripastoral project initiated by Orano and the government of Niger, which is improving food security by developing irrigation systems in arid areas, all of which could not be possible without the support of uranium companies, which understand that they have a role to play in and a responsibility to contribute to the development of the communities in which they are present. I wanted to make 4 further points before concluding my remarks. First is to note the significant contribution to the uranium industry to my home country, Australia. The report draws attention to the incredible value that ERA and Rio Tinto have brought to the communities of the Alligator Rivers region of the Northern Territory, which has included the establishment of a community partnership fund and the Kakadu West Arnhem Social Trust, the identification, protection and amplification of cultural heritage, and the payment of more than 500 million Australian dollars in royalties. What the report doesn't note, due to space constraint, but which I wish to note here, are examples of excellent relationships between uranium companies and traditional owners. In the case of Cameco's relationship with the Madu Nation in Western Australia, which resulted in Cameco Australia taking a delegation of traditional owners to Canada for a fact-finding mission and cultural exchange, is instructive. This brings me to my second point. The report makes clear the need for uranium companies to obtain a social license to operate from the communities that host their operations, and it provides useful guidance and recommendations about how companies might go about gaining and maintaining the support of communities for those operations. This is even more pressing given the report's observation that the majority of uranium developments globally are situated on the traditional lands of First and Tribal peoples, whose consent is absolutely crucial to the approval of projects. Third, as Dan mentioned, in the months between the original launch event and today, I have changed roles within the industry and I now very happily serve as CCO of Silex Systems Limited. Silex is the owner and inventor of the unique Silex laser enrichment technology and holds a 51% stake in its US-based exclusive licensee of that technology, Global Laser Enrichment, in which Cameco holds the other 49%. Silex is incredibly proud of its role in the uranium industry and its potential contribution to the broader nuclear fuel cycle. Using that technology, GLE may be able to enrich uranium to produce the 3 grades of fuel that are required for both today's conventional nuclear power reactors and for the next generation of power reactors, including small modular reactors. More broadly, Silex exemplifies the values inherent in and the leading practices described in the report we're launching today. Indeed, Silex takes its responsibility to contribute to sustainable social and economic development seriously. The company's core business is to support efficient nuclear fuel production for the generation of zero emissions nuclear power, thereby contributing to climate change mitigation efforts. Finally, I wanted to note my optimism for the uranium industry globally. Forecasts of increased nuclear energy uptake driven by a desire to decarbonise our economies and industries and to strengthen energy security in nation states means that demand for uranium to fuel those future plants also will increase. We can see a response to this in the recent decisions of companies to resume operations at mines that have been in long-term care and maintenance, as well as in the traded price of uranium. The corollary of this new investment and attention is that uranium companies will need to renew their focus on community development and engagement initiatives to drive support for their operations and to obtain that social license to operate for new projects that may become economic. I'll leave my remarks here in the hope that they provide a segue to Emma's presentation and the panel discussion that follows. So, Deanne, thank you, and back to you.
Thank you, Jordy. Those were very lovely remarks. And I'd now like to turn to Emma Wong to present a few slides about the report. Emma Wong is a technology and innovation advisor in the Division of Nuclear Technology, Development and Economics at the NEA. She previously worked at the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, in the US for 6 years, and at the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission for 10 years. She holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in chemical engineering from the Universities of Michigan and California, San Diego, respectively. The floor is yours, Emma.
All right, thank you, Deanne. And if the slides can come up, please. I will be giving a brief overview of the report itself. You got a pretty good overview, I think, from Keith and Jordy, and a little bit from DG Magwood as well. So I will just go into more depth about it. You've already heard a lot about how uranium is very important to the nuclear energy and how it can play a very important role in carbon emissions reductions moving forward. And with this demand that Jordy pointed out, that the demand will increase due to the extension of reactor lives and having new designs hopefully being built and coming online, there is a great opportunity to boost mining activities and those associated socioeconomic benefits. This really was a driver, I believe, for this report. And it really looks at initiatives that were designed within a framework to protect the environment and ensure meaningful engagement and benefit sharing of the Indigenous peoples, local communities, and areas beyond the mine site. So this was some of the drivers for putting this report together. And as you can see here, there is a really good point that Keith made that there are positive and adverse effects that could happen from having a mine site. And so it was a part of the work to really focus on case studies from developing and emerging countries to provide leading practices and opportunities and challenges for the environmental protection in the view of maximizing the social and economic benefits. The report, as it's been mentioned, will be launching right after this webinar. And having been able to read and preview the report myself, I was very interested and of all the stories contained and a lot of the great insights that I will now go over. So looking at the scope of the report, we've talked a lot about case studies. The case studies that were included were from Australia, Canada, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Namibia, Niger, and the United States. There probably could have been more of these, but due to the time limitations, I believe these are the ones that were included at this time. And from those case studies that you can read about more in the report, a toolbox of approaches and leading practices were identified, ranging from benefit sharing, community engagement, and then, of course, looking at recommendations for decision makers. In these case studies, this is kind of a viewpoint of the toolbox. On this slide are a few of the key points in each of the areas. When looking at in-country value creation, looking at the different employment strategies, supply chain, and of course, local content, which I'll go over on the next slide. Ensuring that the adverse impacts on environment and people can be mitigated, really emphasizing transparency and robust regulation system and framework. Looking at delivery, really emphasizing a need for a framework, programs, and really looking at building relationships and trust. Jordy and I think Keith both mentioned looking at uranium royalties and taxation. There could be not just the country benefit, but also to the local community benefit and other areas as well. And then the security of supply of uranium, really looking to see what investments are needed and how to create an open and supportive trading environment. And of course, a well-designed policy framework can improve outcomes in all of these areas, which is a big focus of the report. One key concept that I want to highlight is the local content policies, which is talked about in the report. Due to time, I'm not going to go into too much depth on this. I just want to highlight, though, it is an overall approach to try to catalyze that socio-economic development. And really looking at local, and I'm going to emphasize local employment, local procurement, domestic, again, very much local processing, and then linking to non-mining sectors to try to create even more economic and social benefit. Each country, though, has different conditions, so the local content policies are highly context specific. Looking into one of the case studies very quickly, at the Saskatchewan case study, they did have a few agreements of note, the mine surface lease agreement, and then the human resource development agreement that you can read more about. I would like to highlight this graph on this slide, though. The darker green is actually the direct mine site number of employees. And then the lighter green is actually total indirect from the mine site. So even though you can see that there's a lot of employees on the mine site, the impact to the indirect employee count is quite significant. So even just looking at that, you can see where the economic benefit could really be, not just from the mine site, but outside of it as well. Also of note, the results of all of the agreements and regulatory methods and things like this resulted in increased local skilled workers, including the Indigenous persons, and competitive local suppliers and better informed communities. So it's a great success story. So it's not just all about employment. There was a big effort for community engagement and environmental stewardship activities. It's really about trying to more involve the community and have community-based programs, environmental programs, having the local residents helping with sampling points, and that also helps to keep them informed and keep that communication more open and transparent between the industry, government, and local residents. So just a few key observations. I would like to highlight these uranium projects can be successful, but they really need to show real benefits to the community and the regions that they operate in. And the emphasis here is on real benefits. So we can see through the case studies what some of these benefits may look like. So they were very nicely presented in the report. And then partnering across various sectors, looking at like beyond just the mine site is very important in order to create even more value chain to these projects, increasing the trust and transparency between the industry and government as well. So there is a lot of lessons learned. There are a lot of key lessons and recommendations in the report. I just want to mention a few of them on here. They're all included in the report with a lot more description, but really looking at a policy framework and the development of a long-term vision. So not just what we're going to do in the next few years, but really what is that long-term vision by creating this uranium mine development. Looking at strategies for economic diversification. Very importantly, to upskill the workforce, not just for now, but also for the future industry and economic needs. And then again, the taxation and royalties, investing in the communities and even a little beyond that into lots of different areas. And of course, a robust regulatory system should be on top of mind when looking into uranium mining and socioeconomic benefits. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Dion.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Emma, for that. I know it was a very short sort of overview of the report. It has a lot of richness in the report, and I'm hoping that people in the audience will download the report and take a close look. But that was a great overview, so thank you for that. Now I'd like to turn to our first session, our first panel session. It's my great privilege to introduce this panel on Indigenous community perspectives. First, I'd like to acknowledge that many of us in this webinar today reside and work on lands that are traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. And this is also the case for uranium mining operations, many of which are located on traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. Having made that land acknowledgement, I'd like to now invite Tom Larivière and Brett Bradshaw to turn on their cameras, and I'll introduce you. Tom is has a long and proud career in the uranium industry. He was one of the initial people to participate in a pre-employment mill operator program in Beauval in 1980, and then to move into a trainee role at the Clough Lake. It was the first time a progressive system was put in place that allowed people to work several months within 6 different areas of the mill, writing a test between each, and finally becoming fully qualified. Tom has been known to say that special consideration is needed to create programs in the North. Here he's referring to the Northern Canada as the industry modernizes so that community members can continue to work in the workforce. And our second panelist, I'd like to introduce Brett Bradshaw. Brett is the Director of Community Engagement at Creative Fire, a consulting firm that is owned 100% by English River First Nation. Brett works with several clients as well as English River in the area of nuclear energy, and previously worked for 7 years with Cameco, leading Northern Communications and supporting a holistic approach to community engagement. She approaches her work from the perspective that meaningful engagement with rights holders and stakeholders is not merely a process of consultation, it is in fact a culture. So welcome, Brett, and welcome, Tom. Could you please introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself, tell us a little bit about your community and your relationship to the uranium mining sector. Just take a few minutes, please.
My name is Tom Larivière. I'm from Patchenag, a town called Patchenag, but people know it as the English River First Nations band here. So, and I live here all my life. I'm retired from the mines. I'm 70 years old now. I'm retired from the mine. I work in the mining industry for the last 38 years. And I remember when I first started in 1980 in Clough Lake, everything was all hands-on. As time goes by, and it improved lots. Everything's all automated now. It can run a machine. It can run everything from a computer now, and it changed. It was a big transition that during that time of my employment with the mining, and my relationship with the mine is that it gave me a good life, and I expect the training I got was excellent. You know, right now, even though I'm retired, if a company was to grab me and put it in me in a mill, I can just work right off the bat, because I knew my role and my responsibility, and throughout the years, so it gave me a good value. Well, I can say that, and I like to see younger generation have the same training I got and feel free and accomplish themselves, not only in the mill but other areas of the trade, mechanics, heavy duty, and and electrician, and other areas of the industry. So I like to see a more improvement and more training and everything done properly. That's all I got to say.
Thanks so much, Tom. You were a young man when you started working in the uranium sector, and you were in that sector for a long time.
Yes.
Did your opinion of the sector change over time? Was it always a positive? You said it gave you a good life, but did you ever have moments where you changed your mind and had a different perspective?
Well, I did change my mind. Back in, I think it was 90 or 92, I left the mines for about 3 years, 4 years, and I just had to go back to it. It was in my blood. I had to do it. You know, I had to go back to it, because there was no other way but working in mines and benefit from it.
Terrific. Thanks. I'll come back with more questions in a moment, but first I'd like to invite Brett. Please introduce yourself, Brett, and your organization, Creative Fire. What is Creative Fire, and what is its relationship to the English River First Nation?
Hey, well, thank you, Diane. Yes, Creative Fire has been an English River First Nation company since late 2019, and we are 100% owned Indigenous consulting firm. So we work a lot in the space of reconciliation. That's kind of the thoroughfare through all of our work, from Indigenous engagement to communications and reconciliation action plans. And we have, because we come from English River, there is a strong interest in the nuclear industry, and a lot of our work, is in that area. So, I'm currently supporting the nation through a shared prosperity agreement with one of the uranium companies here in Saskatchewan, and but have other clients that range from exploration in the industry to nuclear energy providers, and those planning for new nuclear technology to be a source of energy in the future.
Thanks, Brett. Tom, if you're still there, please come back on camera. We have more questions for you. Terrific. Not letting you off the hook that easy. Okay, so Tom, I'd love to know more about, I know, you can share your personal experience, but maybe you can help us understand, is it very controversial in the community? Is there a debate? Does the whole community sort of feel generally positive, or is it a divisive issue? Are some people against?
Oh, it's a positive issue where it's like a lot of like a couple of my boys they're still working in the mines, and I have lots of young people are still there for a number of years now, and it's a benefit. It's a benefit. It's one of the main industries in the north right now. Besides, like our fishing is dying, and our trapping industry is dead. Might as well say it's dying, and there's forestry, but there's not much activity in forestry, depending on how many houses the global wants and stuff like that. But mining has been one of how do you say, that accommodate a lot of employment and stuff like that. So and it's not only uranium mining, there's gold mining too. So it played a major role in the north and regarding employment wise, and people benefited direct. There was a direct impact to the communities, and there's indirect impacts from like other companies from other places that benefit from it. So it's a good thing it's still there. Without the mining, I don't know what kind of jobs they have in the north.
Yeah, for sure. And so the main benefit to you has been employment and jobs. Did the companies approach community development with other types of investments? Did that touch your family at all in terms of school programs or education programs, or was it mainly about the jobs?
Well, actually, back in 1985 or 86, I think we moved down south. My wife got accepted in university, and so we moved down south. And while I was working in the mines, and we bought a house, and she went to school and she got her degree. You know, and it benefited that way. You know what I mean? And my kids got a good education out of it.
So intergenerational impacts.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. And do you feel like the young generation coming up now, you know, in their teens and getting ready to join the workforce, are they excited about working at the mine?
Oh yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, I know there's post-secondary programs now they have, and see a lot of students that go to universities and technical trades, they get first crack at summer jobs, and they really enjoyed that, and you know. Everything is there. Like, you know, I like to see more training at the university levels regarding towards the mining. And I remember the first time I started in the 1980s in Clough Lake. You know, Saskatchewan wasn't prepared for these mines. See, most of the technical people came from down east, the religious people. We didn't have no programs of that at university level those days. Now I like to see some improvement in the training area, in the schools area, university areas, where if this industry is going to continue, I like to see more input from the training perspective of it, like university levels. Have decent metallurgy programs and stuff like that. You know, and you're talking about nuclear industry now, and you know, we need some, you know, scientists, physicists out here, you know, start training them early.
You're right. It's not just physicists. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of different kinds of jobs, and I think part of, I mean, you didn't say it in these words, but part of what I heard was it's a way to create opportunities for young people so that they don't have to leave the community to find work, right? Like they can stay in their community and their culture, is I think what I heard you sort of implying. Let me ask Brett a question now. Brett, how do you see in your work and in your experience, both with Cameco and Creative Fire, you and I have talked about the distinction between rights holders and stakeholders, and Indigenous peoples as rights holders. But what does that distinction mean to you? What is the difference between a rights holder and a stakeholder?
Sure. Well, I think when we're thinking of stakeholders, that is really it's a general term. It applies to any, person, organization, group that has the potential to be, impact or influence a project or initiative, where, rights holders is much more specific, and it refers to those, constitutional rights and those inherent rights and that relationship that Indigenous people and communities have with their lands. And and that distinction really does, change the approach and the level of engagement that's needed in projects.
So what is the goal then of engagement, and what makes it meaningful?
Right. I think what makes it meaningful is that willingness to have a shared experience and to collaborate. It's a flexibility, to move away from timelines and to really create something unique. You can go on and on, but I think I think those principles really infuse that meaning. A wanting to learn and understand actually what shared value and benefits mean, and that's going to look different with different communities and different projects. It's there's a lot of nuance there, and I think that that willingness to come to the table with kind of fresh eyes and an open mind, and that kind of persistence and patience is what makes it meaningful.
And so I think you're really emphasizing that it's not a one size fits all, that you can't have a standard benefit sharing agreement or a standard set of steps that you're going to take in building trust or undertaking meaningful engagement. But surely there are also, so it has to be sort of suits the community that you're engaging with, and there will be some unique characteristics to each community. But surely there would also be some universal principles to this, some things that sort of because otherwise, how would a mining company, like, what would be your advice that irrespective of the context they're going into, some core foundational principles that they should abide by in trying to build trust and meaningful engagement?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the most helpful things is always to really start early, and begin that engagement kind of long before there are imminent timelines, and that's not always the way it works. And so sometimes that means, I guess, being willing to pause or step back, and not be so, tightly bound by maybe that kind of plan A, pardon me, and maybe getting down to plan E in the end. I think that's a big part. And, the relationship building on the front end is so important, and understanding what communities' priorities are, and even working with the nation for, the last, over a course of kind of 10 years. I mean, even their, priorities shift and evolve in terms of what's important and what's valuable and what's needed from time to time. So it's really kind of taking that long view and being willing to come to the table and not kind of just think of it within your kind of project timeline in this set amount of years, but really that life cycle. And I think that's what really gets conversations going and allows room to kind of come up with creative and innovative ways to see projects along.
I think that's really good advice, and that point that the priorities of a community evolve over time is also a really important point, because what you're saying is not only start early, but it's a continuous relationship. It's a relationship that grows and has to continue to be nurtured over time. In that context, though, also a community doesn't speak with a single voice even at one moment in time. So do you have any views on how a uranium mining company should approach community engagement in terms of making sure that that women's voices, that different generations' voices are heard, and how does a company navigate that kind of complexity?
Right.
A community is not just one voice.
Totally. And I think, it's especially important early on, and in those efforts to grow energy literacy and awareness and support for the industry, is that, taking a bit of a broader scope, especially to begin with, including, being really inclusive in those engagement activities in terms of who's coming to, those discussions. And, that can help, especially for the longevity of projects, right? Because leadership is going to change, and some of those key people, turn over, but it's building that broader awareness and knowledge and support that, will help the industry and the communities kind of find that growth. And a lot of, in terms of, getting those harder to reach groups within the communities, it's, taking a really diverse approach, I think, in how you're communicating. So using lots of different channels, like, having those coffee chats with elders, having a social media strategy that's reaching other demographics, bringing in youth representatives, just offering childcare at events, feeding people, all those things that just make it easier to participate. Virtual sessions, that's made a big difference, especially when you're dealing with communities that are, quite spread out, urban populations, and this is the case in the English River, are kind of outpacing those, the population in community on reserve. So just finding lots of different ways to reach people. And again, that kind of like, it can't be one approach. It's taking a lot of different measures.
Thank you. Those are really great comments. And I especially really like the comment about if you're going to have a meeting or an engagement session, making childcare available at that event so that parents can participate. I remember being in a Northern Canadian community talking about a project that was just being contemplated. It wasn't planned. It was very early discussions. And the community leaders asked us, what's the timeline for this? And we said, well, maybe the project might start in 15 years. And the feedback we received was, then you should be talking to the students in junior high school, because those kids are going to graduate and they're going to be the ones. And so they actually asked us to bring junior high kids into the conversation in this community engagement, which was not something that we were expecting to hear, like not something that I was expecting to hear. But it really formed my impression of, oh, we really do have to listen to how communities want to be engaged. We can't go in as outsiders with a prescribed idea of what engagement looks like. So I really appreciate your comments here today. I would love to keep chatting, but I think I have to move along to the next panel. So I'd really like to thank both Tom and Brett for these very thoughtful comments that really are reminding us that at the end of the day, this is about people, and this is about connecting with people and listening to people and caring about people. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second panel discussion is going to be about industry, and we'll hear the perspectives of some of the leaders in the uranium mining industry around the world. So now I'd like to invite our three speakers, Nicolas Mais, Brandon Monroe, and Alice Wong, to turn their cameras on, and I'll introduce you now. Nicolas Mais began his career in 2000 at the cement division of Lafarge Group, where he worked for 12 years. But in 2011, he joined Orano Group, which used to be Areva, as the VP of operations of the mining business, with operations in Kazakhstan, Niger, and Canada. In 2012, he also became responsible for corporate social responsibility, for that mining group, mining business group. And from 2014 to 2018, he headed the global services business at Framatome. And in 2018 was appointed CEO of Orano Mining. So a very interesting career, but you could see that thread of, we used to talk about corporate social responsibility, we talk about ESG, but that thread of community and environmental protection was throughout your career, we see. I'd like to introduce Brandon Monroe now, who is CEO of Bannerman Energy. Brandon Monroe, while serving as Bannerman's Resources General Manager between 2009 and 2011, Brandon was responsible for the ESG, for Environmental Social Impact Assessment. And during that time, he served on the steering committee of the world's first strategic environmental assessment on the cumulative effects of uranium mine development in the Namibia desert. Brandon serves as a member of the WNA, World Nuclear Association Advisory Panel, and is former chair of WNA's Nuclear Fuel Demand Working Groups. And last but not least, Alice Wong, Senior Vice President and Chief Corporate Officer at Cameco. Alice is the CCO at Cameco, one of the largest global providers of the fuel needed to energize a clean air world. She provides executive oversight for human resources, safety, health, environment, quality, busy lady, information technology, supply chain management, regulatory affairs, internal audit, and corporate ethics. She also provides executive oversight and leadership to enhance the company's sustainability approach to meet evolving ESG requirements, and is the executive sponsor of the company's digital transformation journey. Okay, so welcome, Alice, Brandon, and Nicolas. I'd like to start by inviting each of you in turn to please introduce yourselves, but also your organization. Tell us what role your organization plays in the overall global uranium sector. And I'll start with Brandon. Over to you. Oh, your microphone is on mute.
Thank you very much, Deanne. And look, thanks for the opportunity to be associated with what is a really exciting launch of an excellent report by the agency and everyone involved. So much appreciated. So Bannerman Energy, we have the Etango Uranium Project, which is a uranium mine development in Namibia. And Namibia is a very significant producer of uranium. It's been the top 5 in the world over many years, and last year was the 3rd largest producer of uranium. We've been producing in uranium in Namibia for about 45 years. Our company is at the front end of that. We, for the last 15 years, have been developing the Etango project from its very first drill hole. So it's been our baby throughout, and we've undertaken all of the enormous amount of study work and engineering work. We've built a pilot plant. We've worked out exactly what needs to be done to responsibly, effectively, and economically bring this uranium to the market. And we've just last December completed the very last of those engineering feasibility studies. So it's a really exciting time for us as a company, because now the next job is to go out there and start financing the construction of this mine and bring to reality what's been the mission of this company for the last 15 years. A couple of metrics so you can understand the impact of Etango. It is a very large uranium mine. Our annual production will be approximately 3.5 million pounds of U3O8. Now, for people who are out there who aren't technically, I'll try and convert that into something that's more meaningful. 3.5 million pounds of uranium is enough uranium to fuel about 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts of nuclear energy. So 7 to 8 gigawatt scale nuclear reactors. Now, if we're to think about the impact, the positive impact that that can have on global climate change, if we were to take that power and use it to replace what's currently produced by coal, that amount of uranium would displace, it would create the energy to displace about 25 million tons of coal per annum. And to create meaning out of that number, if you were to take that amount of coal and put it on a train, a modern coal train, that train is so big that it would stretch from Los Angeles all the way across the United States to New York and halfway back again. I'll let that sink in for a moment. It is a phenomenal impact that our mine will have on energy globally, but also you imagine the carbon impact of displacing that much coal every single year. So as a company, we're obviously very energized and excited, and it's still a small organization. So every single person in our company gets up every day knowing that we're contributing to creating such a big legacy in our personal and professional lives. But just in terms of its immediate impact, that mine will create 760 permanent full-time direct jobs. And in a country like Namibia, which is a developing country, which has a host of challenges with employment and poverty and education, that would have a multiplying effect that would probably lead to about 5,000 indirect jobs as a result of all of the secondary services and, of course, the income generated by well-paid mining jobs from those 760 direct employees. So we're very excited about a profound local impact and obviously an enormous personal and organisational legacy to the biggest challenge that the world faces today in climate change.
Thank you so much, Brandon. There's a lot to unpack there, and I will come back with questions. But first, I'd like to invite Alice from Cameco to introduce Cameco a bit and tell us what role Cameco plays in the overall global sector.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Deanne, for the introduction. And thanks to you and the NEA for having Cameco at this panel. It certainly is a pleasure to join virtually at this event. On behalf of Cameco, and I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the webinar and wherever you are in the world today. I'm joining you from Cameco's head office in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional territory of Cree peoples and the homeland of the Métis. I offer this acknowledgement to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in building meaningful relationships and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Tom and Brett. Cameco has had a long partnership with English River First Nation, and we're grateful to have you with us today and hear your unique and invaluable perspective. So it's really great to see both of you. And it's always a pleasure to share the stage, so to speak, with colleagues like Nikolai and Brandon from Orano and Bannerman to talk about something that we're clearly very passionate about today. And of course, that's the nuclear power industry, and more specifically today, the crucial role that uranium mining in our industry that we will play and the many benefits that come along with it. As Deanne noted, Cameco is one of the largest global providers of nuclear fuel, and our operations do span across the globe, from northern Saskatchewan to Ontario, the United States, and a joint venture in Kazakhstan, plus advanced exploration projects in Saskatchewan and Australia. Across our operations, we employ about 2,400 people. We are also vertically integrated across the nuclear fuel cycle with top-notch refining, conversion, and fuel fabrication facilities. And with our recent joint acquisition of Westinghouse Electric Company, with our partners Brookfield Renewable, we are expanding our reach. Through our fuel manufacturing capabilities and investment in global laser enrichment, we are exploring fabrication of new fuels, including high-assay, low-enriched uranium, or HALEU fuel. I don't know how you say that, but so we are also participating in the development of small modular reactors and have entered into a number of non-binding arrangements to advance their commercialization and deployment in Canada and around the world. And lastly, we have an interest in nuclear sustainability services, the back end of the fuel cycle, which include aiding the responsible cleanup of enrichment facilities that are no longer in operation. These opportunities align with our commitment to manage our business responsibly and sustainably and to increase our contribution to global climate change solutions. That fits nicely into today, what we'll be touching on a little bit more. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Deanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And now, Nicolas, if you could please introduce Orano and help us understand the role you play in the world.
Hello, Diana, and hello, everyone. Great pleasure to be with you and share on those ESG matters. So Orano Mining is part of the Orano Group. Orano Group is involved in all the steps of the nuclear fuel cycle, from mining, conversion, enrichment, and as well the back-end operations with the spent fuel management, reprocessing, and recycling today 10% of the energy produced in France is produced with recycled nuclear fuel, which is already a key step in minimizing environmental footprint. Now, as for uranium mining, we've been mining for more than 60 years. We have more than 60 years experience in uranium. We're part of the top 3 today with, I would say, roughly 15% market share on a worldwide basis. We employ 3,000 people. And in the countries where we operate, more than 98% of our staff is local. Compared to the other players in this industry, what are our differences? I would say one of them is we're probably the most diverse. We have operations in Niger, Canada, Kazakhstan. We have projects in Mongolia, Uzbekistan, Namibia, and we had operations in the past in the US and France as well. That's one of our differences. I think our second difference is that we have a very significant experience in decommissioning. We have decommissioned and returned to a second life sites in the US, sites in Gabon, sites in France, sites in Canada. Earlier, Tom mentioned Clough Lake. We are in the last step of returning Clough Lake back to the ground. And at the moment, we are decommissioning one site in Niger as well. We have been a supporter of EITI ever since it was created back in 2003. We have been one of the first ones to publish our contracts with governments on our website. And we are an active member of ICMM since 2011. I'm mentioning those decommissioning activities and those commitments to EITI and ICMM and how long they've been lasting, just to illustrate the fact that ESG for us is not the flavor of the month, but this is the way we are developing our activities and have been so. Very honored to have the privilege to share our experience later in this panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I now have a question prepared for each of you. But as you answer the question, I'd like to know, I mean, we heard from Tom Larivière from English River First Nation and his personal experience with mining as a community member, as an employee, as a young man, and only recently retired at 70. And we also heard from Brett Bradshaw, who has extensive experience in Indigenous engagement and communications. Did what they say and how they said it, did it resonate with your own organization's philosophy and approach to community engagement? So just sort of think about that when you're answering these questions, but let me ask the specific questions to each of you. Brandon, you talked about your role, and rather Bannerman's role, which includes prospecting and exploration. Are there any specific or unique challenges, opportunities and challenges actually, to engagement and social license that are associated with these early stages of the mine life cycle?
Diane, absolutely, there's both of those. The opportunity and the privilege that we've had is we've had custodianship of this asset, of this ore body and this host community relationship right from the very beginning. And that's a tremendous advantage, because the risk or what can go wrong is quite often with uranium prospectors, geologists who are wandering around in the desert or wherever they might be. They don't always have community engagement front of mind. And the way that the mineral sector generally works is you've got groups who specialize in that very early exploration. And then in one way or another, once they've made a discovery, they pass it on to a group who specializes in the next form of development, which is drilling a whole lot of holes and doing engineering and starting to think about environmental studies. Then it would get to being passed on or bought by a company much like where Bannerman is at the moment. And ultimately, it then goes to the final stage, which would be much like a producer or maybe one of the giants like Alice or Nikolai. So what I'm saying is many times the people who are right at the front end of that are not thinking about the community engagement and host community expectations that will be inherited by the companies at the end of that. And that's where you get all sorts of miscommunications, you get misunderstood expectations. People might make promises right at the beginning that are not kept at the end or not even known about at the end. And so for us, we've been able to control that because we've been the one organisation throughout, and we've got one stage to go, and we're very excited about becoming the producer as well. So that's been our opportunity, but it's also a risk to companies. It's a risk to assets. I can think of many examples in my career as a mergers and acquisitions lawyer before I joined the uranium sector, where we would do due diligence on an asset on behalf of a client in the mineral sector, and that asset simply wouldn't pass due diligence because it was tainted or was compromised by poor community relationships. And these days, with the focus from investors and companies on ESG matters, that's a non-starter. That's a game stopper, a roadblock. So there's many assets out there where there's a lot to be done retrospectively to try and fix mistakes that have been made by previous custodians in the past. Now, if I can just share one of the ways that the Namibian uranium industry has tried to address that risk. A number of years ago, Rio Tinto, who were the operator and founder of the Rossing uranium mine, together with Orano and a handful of the developers, including ourselves, they formed the Namibian Uranium Association. And the objective was to try and make sure that in an ensuing uranium rush, when speculators and prospectors and investors and stock exchange listed companies would come rushing into Namibia to make their fortune in uranium, that those mistakes wouldn't be made, that those incoming exploration geologists and companies would understand what the ground rules were, what the expectations were, what the community wanted, and that would try and ensure that those mistakes from elsewhere weren't inherited or imported into Namibia. And I must say, it's been a phenomenal success. I've been involved with that body since 2009, and it's really a world standard case study into how an industry should cooperate to try and preserve and offer appropriate stewardship for a multi-decade foundational industry that, in Namibia's case, a large part of the country is built off the 45 years of uranium production that Namibia can boast. So that's the challenge. That's how we've dealt with it as a company, but most importantly, that's how Namibia as a uranium producing nation has dealt with it as an industry.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. And one of the things that I'd like to tease out is implicit in what you were saying is the evolution of expectations over time and the learnings from past mistakes, and in some cases worse than mistakes, and that we are still learning, and that this report exists within that learning curve. That this report it is really attempting to sort of capture lessons learned and best practices as we know them today, and continue to promote this learning. Let me turn now to Alice. Cameco has operations in remote areas in northern Saskatchewan in Canada. Could you tell us about your approaches to both engaging people and also protecting the environment? Because those are sensitive, delicate environments in some cases in the north. Are your approaches uniquely suited to the setting in remote northern Saskatchewan, or is there something universal, some lesson learned from how you approach things in Saskatchewan that would apply across other settings?
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Deanne. I'd like to first start by saying thanks and congratulations to all those that were involved in the creation of the new report. I think it's the industry thinks it's important, and it's one that can possibly be used as a blueprint for as we look to develop future mining projects. And of course, as you said, it would continue to evolve. These are the best practices today. They will evolve as time goes on, but it's certainly a good start. And it's no secret today that nuclear power is fueled by uranium, and Brandon did a wonderful example of how powerful that is. And so when you consider all of the larger global issues today, be it climate change or net zero electrification, decarbonization, energy security, a common solution emerges for all of those, and that's nuclear power. And so importantly, we're going to really need to do, we're going to have nuclear power come on, but we're going to need more uranium to actually support it. And that means we need to do it in a way that's safe and responsible, in a way that promotes sustainable development. And this report, I think, really helps to set the stage for that. So in Cameco, we've seen the firsthand benefits of that approach during our time in the mining business. We've been engaged in sustainably producing by protecting and engaging and supporting the development of people and their communities and the protection of the environment, as you mentioned, Deanne. And we've been doing this for more than 30 years. And so it certainly, as Nicholas said, this is not the flavor of the month. This has been the flavor for 3 decades and more. And so our mines and mills in Saskatchewan, they are the heart of our operations, as you've noted, and they are a very good example of how we approach ESG and sustainability. So from the very start, we knew that our long-term success in Northern Saskatchewan would have to happen in partnership with the Indigenous peoples who are near our operations. So for us, engagement has always been at the heart of our strategy. Engagement between Cameco and the communities primarily occur by having these open communication to address questions and concerns that come up in a timely manner. And so we have in place signed agreements that formalize these relationships with 17 First Nations, Métis and municipalities in specific areas where we operate. And these agreements are focused on 5 pillars: on workforce development, business development, community investment, environmental stewardship, and community engagement. And one of these agreements is with the English River First Nation, so they'd be very familiar with it. And it stems from the development of our flagship Key Lake and McArthur River operations, which were discovered in the early 1970s. So through these agreements, what we really aim to do is optimize benefits and specific needs of each community and give more certainty around the investment and local business opportunities and the development of a long-lasting relationship. We're really quite proud of these relationships and the positive socio-economic growth and development that we've seen over the years in the communities near our operations. And we've seen this in other areas as well where we operate, but I'll focus on Northern Saskatchewan. On the environment piece, if you want me to touch on that now as well, we obviously take this very seriously when it comes to operating on the land and stewardship of the environment. And trust, I would say, is probably the most, we'd all agree, is the most important aspect of any relationship. And so it's no different for us with our northern partners. And a big part of building the trust is not only engaging, but also involving community members in our environmental program, environmental monitoring programs. So our company has a very robust environmental protection programs. They require tens of thousands of samples each year to be collected, water, air, soil, plants, fish, and they're collected from numerous locations around our operations. Each of the samples are tested to ensure that our environmental protection programs are continuously effective and the results are reported to regulatory bodies. And as Emma noted in her opening remarks, in addition to our own company's environmental programs, we have collaborated with our communities and regional partners on 2 community-based environmental monitoring programs. Nikolai would be familiar with these programs because Orano is also a partner in them. These programs uphold our commitments to measuring and mitigating the environmental impacts of our activities. These are independent programs that monitor downstream of our operations to ensure that there's no cumulative impacts on the regional watershed. And these programs also monitor the safety of traditionally harvested foods. So local residents take part in the sample collection. They provide opportunities for employment, training, and business development as well. And by being part of this process, it actually helps community members have confidence that the traditional harvested foods are safe and that they can be consumed. And it further strengthens the relationship with the communities and the companies. These programs are heavily supported by local people because it's based on their lifestyle and the land use. And so having confidence in the process itself and the result is very key because it provides community members with the peace of mind that they can continue to practice their traditional lifestyle and encourages them to consume the country foods. These programs have been proven to be successful. Recently, they did a 10-year study from the Eastern Athabasca Regional Monitoring Program. Over the last 10 years, the community members have collected and submitted hundreds of samples from fish, moose, caribou, and much more. And the results from the last 10 years have shown that the traditional foods in these areas are safe for consumption. And there's lots more I could talk about, but I'm going to stop there, Deanne, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's a really great example of one of the ways that that community wanted to participate in environmental monitoring, collecting the samples and being part of the process, or part of the checks and balances, and that built transparency and trust, and probably also created some jobs while you were at it. But that's a very concrete example and a really good one. So thank you for sharing that one. Nicolas, I'd like to ask you about the Cominac mine in Niger. You recently closed that mine in Niger. And so we talked with Brandon about the early stages of the life cycle. Now I'd like to hear from you on the end of the life cycle for a mine. Could you tell us about the experience of closing that mine in Niger? What worked well and what were the lessons learned?
Yeah, sure. I can share our experience. The first thing I would say is that we see mining as an end-to-end process, right? You go from exploration and to site reclamation and transitioning it to a second life. And in fact, what you do in that last part is very important for the trust you can develop in the early stages in another place. Because when we come to a community, what people think is, okay, you're going to disturb our environment. What will be the impact on us? Will we benefit from it? But what will we be left with at the end? What will be the legacy of that site? And the reality of uranium mining today is that the number of companies that have actually developed, operated, and recommissioned the site is extremely limited. Because of the context in which uranium mining was initially developed, it was either developed by governments or it was developed by early pioneers, but a lot of them bankrupted their sites or just left it after. And probably it's a key issue with uranium mining. We consider it as an end-to-end process, and so we pay very heavy attention to the end of life. One thing that we've not done, for example, is to sell a site that will be a few years from its end of life and sell it to someone else. So when we are a few years before the end of life, we go to the end and we do the reclamation properly. The way we've done it, in fact, is a bit like what you would do in a textbook approach, saying, let's get the full mapping of the stakeholders and understand what are their expectations. And when we say stakeholders, it's of course all kinds of stakeholders, government, but as well civil society, but as well the more simple people, the women associations, or the herders, or the farmers. And what we found, and I think this echoes what Brett said, is that in a lot of cases, you need to go and find the people where they are, because they won't come to the meetings. And even sometimes with childcare, they won't come to the meetings. So we've made a deliberate approach to go and see them where they are. In Niger, we called it do a caravan, where we'd go in the various districts of the city of Arlit, or go to the various settlements and with the people there where they are, so that they can speak freely in their environment. Not in front of a slideshow, but sitting together in their environment and discussing. What it helped us to do is to build then a plan on 3 pillars. One of them was technical, where our objective was to build a plan and put the site in a safe conditions, both from a pure safety perspective, but as well as radiological aspect, and non-polluting then site, a social plan, and a community support plan. And that plan, on each of the axes, we took a number of commitments, and we made those commitments public. And the benefit of that then is that people could debate with us the commitments. We could debate the gradation of those commitments, are they adequate or not? But then as we implement our closure plan, we can be measured against our commitments. And that's extremely strong in terms of credibility. And the benefit is that we can demonstrate that we're doing it. The other benefit is that when we're not doing it, then the community is coming back to us and saying, oh, you said you would do that, where are you on that? Because we can't see it happening. And then we can engage and have the debate, explain why this takes more time, or revisit some of it when it's necessary because it's not adequate. One of the points we've seen in doing that is a key matter, and we'll come back to that probably in the last lessons learned, but it's not that easy to find community investment in that context that is sustainable and useful to the populations, but I keep that for a later stage. In the examples of successes that we had, the social plan, for example, the unions initially were telling us, well, you need to give us a big check. And we said, well, first we're going to speak about the next phase of your life. And then we'll discuss about the check. But if we discuss the check, you will not focus on the next phase of your life. And an evidence of the success it was is that more than 87% that we've had to let go so far have a next step in their life. 87% in an environment of Niger, that's pretty good. Second example, we said we will get more than 90% of the hours worked on the site decommissioning worked by local people, Nigerian people and northern Niger. And in fact, at the moment, we are more than 95%, getting to 98% of the hours worked on the site decommissioning worked by local people, which is an impact. Those are for the part that worked well. We faced one tricky part, and we didn't anticipate it that well, is that the site decommissioning, it's a 150 million euros budget, is seen by a lot of people as a last opportunity to make money out of that site. And when I say a lot of people, it's local companies, it's local employees, it's local politicians, all kinds of stakeholders. And that creates or generates some very strange behaviors, to say the least, very deviant behaviors. And that is something that we didn't anticipate and that we've had to manage so that we can manage that big pot of money in a way where it's fairly done, it's fully compliant, and it's done in a transparent manner. And then we've done it, we re-explained thoroughly the process we've had, we've made it transparent, we've explained the rules, and we've done that. But this is something we didn't really anticipate. And in reality, well, we should. So that's a lessons learned for us in that decommission side. But yeah, success was a key engagement with stakeholders initially, define a plan with them, take commitments, publish them, publish on the progress, and manage that part, expectations of people that are not so clear sometimes. That's our experience.
Thank you. And thank you for, to all three of you, really like painting a real picture of what's happening at these different stages in the life cycle and what some of the real strategies and examples of real challenges. That really helps, because often this topic is addressed with generalities, and there are general principles, but when it's when they translate to specific examples that we see where the challenges are. And so we have only 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you one last question. If you've got a little less than 1 minute each. What would be the one key lesson learned or one recommendation for others in the uranium sector? Going back to the title of the report, Maximizing Social, Environmental, and Economic Benefits from Uranium Mining. What's sort of your one key message? But I'm actually going to add something to it, because Nicolas, to my question, because Nicolas, you talked about fairness. How do you know that the results have been the benefits have been shared fairly? We all have a sense of what environmental protection amounts to. Like, we want to minimize pollution and adverse environmental effects. But how do you know that you really have shared the benefits fairly and maximize those social and environmental benefits? So, Brandon first, maybe.
Okay, so the learning that could pass on to others in our sector, particularly approaching our stage of development, it's very important to clarify community expectations and then manage those expectations, because you're dealing with people's hopes and dreams, you're dealing with people's souls. When a mine comes to town, or even the possibility of a mine coming to town, it's like every single person's got a lottery ticket in their hands thinking their life will change. And the reality for 99% of early stage exploration is that's just not the case. So expectations need to be understood, they need to be managed, they need to be mitigated, and they have to be constantly recalibrated, because if you're not constantly talking to the community about what's realistic, what's possible, what's unlikely, their hopes and dreams will carry on without you. And the next time you come around and see them, they'll have already hoped and developed aspirations that you can't possibly meet. So it's about understanding them, but also managing expectations for something that's realistic to be delivered.
Thank you, Brandon. Alice.
Thanks. I'm going to pick one thing, and that is that we have to work together. And that sounds kind of generic, so I'll give you an example. But any relationship, you know that you have to work together, you have to go through trials and tribulations, but the important thing is to stay at the table. And so we can have ups and downs, but we have to stay at the table and try to work together. And the other thing is that things evolve. I think Brett mentioned this, that you have to be flexible as things are when you're at the table and things are changing and evolving, you have to be flexible to adapt to those things. And one of the things, to give you a concrete example about fairness in that, so you observe what is in the community, what is the needs of the community. And so one of the things that we knew for our mines and mills is that we're moving into digital and automation, right? So that's something that and the industry is doing that. So what can we do to help the communities be better prepared? And so what we did was we sat down and we collaborated and we came up with some training courses. We had 15, I believe, 15 training courses that we provided to communities that they come and sign up for them. They looked at digital, they looked at how to work in an industrial setting, and how to work at a place like Cameco. And so we offered these, we started this in 2021 and tied that up with apprenticeships as well. And so we tried to evolve that training and tried to bring it into what we knew that was going to be happening in the future. And part of it was also that in the courses that we offered, and they could come in, and they were free to come and do it. We also tried to find some funding to help us with that. But the key thing was we also said we want 50% of those students to be women. And so we were successful in the first couple of years of doing that. Now what we've done to evolve that is to put job placements in there, so short job placements, so they can have a little bit of experience applying the knowledge that they've learned. I'm super excited about that program because it's something that's real and hopefully will help get them the skills that we all need. We're all going through a digital stage. So I'll stop there, but that is one of the lessons.
Thank you, Alice. And that resonates so closely with what we heard from Tom's personal experience. Nicolas, same question. Over to you.
Okay, if I was to share one key learning for us is that the definition of what the community is or who the community is not a defined and precise definition, right? It's quite vast. And then the vision of what is useful for that community or those communities, and whether it's shared fairly or not, somewhat differs if you talk to central government, local government, NGOs, or the people that are actually impacted by your activities. And so finding the balance in the management of all those expectations is a tricky one, but it has to be done because their vision is not aligned. In our experience, this has to be done or to be managed by engaging genuinely with the various levels and acting when we can as a catalyst for multi-party initiatives where the various expectations can be defined and then transformed into tangible, concrete projects where the various levels can collaborate. But understanding that their vision differs is critical. Yeah.
Thank you so much, all three of you. What a rich and wonderful conversation. I think we all learned a lot. Thank you for your participation. We are out of time, but I would like to give Keith Cunningham the opportunity to have the last word. So I'll thank our panelists and ask you to turn your cameras off. And Keith, if you could turn your camera on, you have maybe one minute or so to have the final few words.
Okay, very quick here then. There's a lot of common threads between all the presenters and panelists about start early, build trust, collaborate. And that's a really important message right through, certainly with our attention on carbon-free emissions and everything else. There's a lot of positives in the last couple of years with uranium, both on prices and demand scenarios. And I wanted to add here before the end, just my thanks to the UMed members for letting me be chairman, to my co-chair, Jordy Greats, and all the participants. All the participants are listed in the document if people want to go take a look. Thanks to you all. Special thanks goes to Luminita Grancia for her contribution and dedication and her perseverance in getting us here today. And also to Wendy Hote, who gave a lot of administration for all our committee meetings and everything else. Thanks to Diane, Emma, and Christy for today's meeting, all our panelists, Tom, Brett, Nicholas, Alice, and Brandon. Thanks again. And I certainly am proud of Saskatchewan's participation and our accomplishments with the industry and, Cameco's and Orano's roles in those, and their continued work in striving for a better future and for a sustainable uranium industry. So that's my quick minute. Thanks a lot. And Mike, you're done.
Wonderful words to end with. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our webinar.